How is everybody doing today? Yes, I'm tired. Yes, it's early. But today we are going to be making a video about something pretty interesting, a little bit more fun than yesterday's video. I think yesterday's video just got a little bit too out of control, and I'm going to just let it be there for that. But today we are going to be looking at a certain graph, looking at these characters and how much money people spend on Honkai Star, which I honestly think it's super interesting seeing how people spend their money in regards to a gacha game, especially when a lot of these characters are more personality driven, I guess you could say, where a lot of people get them for the design or possibly how the character acts or maybe just the gameplay style that we have a lot of different opportunities or paths for when it comes to what's in the game. And today we're going to be looking at that. But really quickly, I do want to say one thing, because although it kind of doesn't have a place in this video, and I will have a section to be able to skip forward if you don't really care about this, because it doesn't really associate with Star Wars as much. But as you know, in the Penny trailer that we had coming up into Penny, we did have a reference to Dragon Ball, which was the Yamcha pose for Stella. And with that being said, with it being as upsetting as it is that Akira Toriyama did pass, and I'm not asking for likes, I'm not asking for comments or anything like that. You don't even have to comment about it or anything. I just want to say that for as legendary as he was, that he does deserve a spot, I guess, in this video, just because he did play a very big part in a lot of people's upbringing, a lot of people's culture, how they did their lifestyle. So it is kind of upsetting that he did pass, and holy crap, does he have so many different references in so many different parts of the world, and also the series that he's been able to create himself and also inspire others. So I just want to leave that there. He was definitely a big part of my first step into content creating, with me making Dragon Ball gacha videos and also Kakarot videos, or attempting to. And now we're here doing Star Rail, where Iz even followed us here with the Yamcha post, which is funny enough. But that's what I want to say very quickly. I would love to say hours and hours of more things, but we're going to go back into the video. Sorry, my voice is a little shaky there. It is a little upsetting still. But going into what we're going to be talking about today, it is going to be the revenue chart for the, if I can find it, the Star Rail top grossing or money spent for each character. And this is going to be from when the game came out all the way up until right now in March 1st and up into the App Store. And right now we're looking at what these characters have been spent, and we see a lot of peaks. I'm seeing a lot of peaks when it comes to something going past Cele, which isn't honestly something usual. In all honesty, I don't really see a lot of gacha games where the peaks outweigh the first initial banner, because the first initial banner, a lot of people spend so much money during the beginning portions of the game, because you have the battle passes, you have the monthly passes, you have the standard characters that people might want to come and fill out. I know for me, when it was time for me to hit my 300 pity, I did it on the second day because I wanted Bronya, not because she was broken. I didn't know she was going to be broken at the start of the game, because I didn't really test anything at the start of the game. But I just wanted Bronya because she was a Honkai Impact character, and Bronya to go with Cele, that was absolutely perfect. So I 100% understand why Cele is all the way up there. Of course, being the start of the game, everyone wants to spend, everyone wants to get Cele, and then that was basically it. You wanted to either get the standard characters as well, you wanted to get Cele, or you were just going to spend your stones or get the monthly, get the, what is it called, battle pass, and set yourself up for the next few characters that you probably would have liked if you didn't get Cele. Now we are definitely going to talk about these peaks that go above Cele or match Cele, which is actually kind of crazy for a gacha game to hold. But going into the next banner, it's not really a surprise, Jing Yuan being a little bit lower, because after the first banner, after everyone spends their money on the first character that has ever come out for Star Rail, getting another DPS when MOC wasn't really fleshed out didn't really make sense for a lot of different players, especially because some people already knew that he had a delayed damage mechanic, which was Lightning Lord, and at the time a lot of people didn't like units that didn't have instantaneous damage, and we can see that even later with Kafka, and we're going to talk about that later. But it honestly makes sense, and it's honestly not a bad dip. Honestly, the space between Cele's peak and then Jing Yuan's peak isn't that low for the first step of the game, and for a second character, because as you can see as we get later down the list, these peaks end up changing drastically compared to Jing Yuan. So it looks pretty cool to see that at the start of the game, people were spending money, of course, as a HuoHuo game. So this is a really cool thing to look at when it comes to what people were looking at for Cele, what people were looking at for Jing Yuan, and seeing that we had doubled up DPS. You had a choice, really. It was, do you want Cele or do you want Jing Yuan? It was either or, and people were excited for both equally. Cele had the Honkai fanatics up in, I guess you could say in Storm, because they were ready for her to drop and to start spending money on Star Rail. And then Jing Yuan also was like, oh, this dude with this huge lightning lore has really cool animations, has Jotaro as the voice actor. There's a lot of really cool, appealing things that came with both these characters. So you got to basically choose your, I guess you say, ice cream flavor when it came to your account. And honestly, I found that to be a really cool thing that they set us up for that, not giving us a, let's say, a DPS and then also a sustainer or support, because that would have made people want to summon even more, maybe even bringing it even higher. And that would have changed a lot. But seeing that they did give us 2 DPS at the start, they gave us a chance to decide how we want to choose our route when it came to building out our account. And then the next character that came out was Silverwolf, which, funny enough, beat out the peak for Sela. I've seen a couple graphs that says Sela is still the #1 chart, but this is going off of CN's App Store purchases, which I think a lot of other graphs also carry on. So I wonder how super duper accurate this is. But to see that the first ever banner gets eclipsed by other peaks in this graph is kind of insane now that I think about it, especially looking at with Silverwolf, with how absolutely game breaking she was at the time. At version 1.1, we called this the God patch, and it was Luocha and also Silverwolf. And at the time when elites were 1 at a time in MOC, Silverwolf was God tier. She was able to implant the quantum for Jing Yuan. I mean, not quantum for Jing Yuan, but the lightning for Jing Yuan, or the quantum for Sela, especially if you didn't have the weaknesses they needed when it came to imaginary, because at the time a lot of imaginary enemies were on the field and nobody had Wealth at the time, who was our only imaginary at the time. And looking at what we had with Silverwolf, it made any DPS work no matter what when it came to MOC, when people were struggling with it, with not having the weaknesses for the right side. And it was just a really, really good character, especially with all the debuffs that she had, implementing the bug. She was by far a busted character at the time for sure. And looking at where she is now, in a way she still has that spot, but we do have other characters that kind of eclipse her in not her own area, which is debuffing, but in terms of buffing, she has been eclipsed by a lot of crazy characters that came out in the future. Now going back to my boy, oh no, how bad they what did they do to you? We're looking at Luocha, and he is by far one of the lowest, or among the lowest peaks in the graph. And funny enough, you see a lot of supports being put down to the bottom, like Luocha, or more sustains like Luocha, Xuan, HuoHuo. These characters have all been low peaks in the game. That's very interesting, because I see a lot of people now, and I wonder what's going to happen when their reruns come, because a lot of these sustainers haven't gotten their first rerun. Luocha hasn't gotten it, Xuan hasn't gotten it, and also HuoHuo hasn't gotten it. So looking at the sustainers and seeing how their reruns are going to come up very, very soon with 2.1 and 2.2, I wonder how the rerun charts are going to be for a lot of these characters, because when we go to Xuan and we go to HuoHuo, these are some of the most craziest sustains in the game, and not a lot of people pick them up, as it seems, and a lot of people talking about them now. A lot of people have them in best in slot teams for a lot of different DPS characters that we have currently in the game. So I definitely want to see how those reruns look when they come back. But going into our next set of characters, which I think were a big fan service type of patch, because we did have Blade and we also had Kafka, which we may know Kafka was a huge fan favorite for a lot of people, and to see Blade higher than her actually is interesting. Now I do want to say that Blade possibly might be higher than Kafka, just because he had regular DPS. He was just a regular DPS unit. He was hyped up from the story, which a lot of people loved him. But Kafka, for some reason, a lot of these dot units just do not sell particularly well with other DPS units. As you can see, Kafka is the lowest of these early gen units that have the DPS role. And then Black Swan down here doesn't touch a peak that is anywhere near Jingliu, Dan Heng, Silverwolf, Jing Yuan, Sela. None of them even compare. And rightfully so. If you didn't get Kafka, you weren't going to get Black Swan for the most part. A lot of people really wanted to have those two on the account together if they were going to summon on Black Swan, and if they didn't, they would have just opted for another DPS. So looking at how the dot units don't sell particularly well, I wonder why specifically. I would love to see if there was a chart that compared CN to global, or CN to the US, anything like that, to see if there's any differences in how people spend, because it seems like CN probably doesn't like dot as much, which is honestly very, very interesting to see why. I might have to ask Pokey why, if he can gather information for it. But going into our next set of banners, which is Dan Heng and Xuan. Now there is two things I want to talk about. For Dan Heng specifically, he was the definition of power creep at the time, and he is the highest point of this graph with the most amount of sales for him. And it makes sense. At the time, everyone was saying how ungodly broken he was when it came to his power in the game. He basically, at the time of his own MOC, was deleting everything without weakness, and when it came time for his weakness, everything got shot off the board in less than a cycle. It was absolutely insane to see how much power he had. But with the characters we had at the moment, he did get held back unless you had some really cracked out speed builds where you're able to generate a fat ton of skill points. It was hard to use 3-point skill point attack all the way every single time until Sparkle came out. But looking at how he is the #1 banner of all time, apparently, this is actually insane for someone to peek out not only a lot of the other characters like Silverwolf, but also someone like Cele. So that's actually insane. And then I can understand why Xuan might be a little bit lower, or not a little bit, a lot lower, as most of these other sustains, because as we said already, Dan Heng was absolutely broken at the time, at the point where he was just one-shotting things with his 3 skill point attack. And if everyone summoned for Dan Heng, then they probably were just gonna save their stones for having, or save their J's for the next character, which was Jingliu, who was gonna be the next DPS character, while Xuan is there just chilling. I think not a lot of people were excited for Xuan at the time. We did think she was pretty good with her giving crit rate, with her giving the HP boost, with her giving a lot of other things. But at the time, some people had probably Japard, Bailu, Natasha, and Fire MC, so they felt like they had enough sustains for what we had at the moment, and especially for the power we were dealing with having like these units who weren't hitting so hard. So like characters like Blade, Dan Heng, characters like Jing Yuan, Cele, they were still wrecking through enemies, and we didn't have to worry so much about sustains at the time. So I can kind of understand why sustains don't sell very well, because if you always cater towards the offensive side rather than the defensive side, then I can see why these characters would be a little bit lower. I do wonder if they make the enemy so strong to a point where even if you do a lot of damage to them, they don't die, and you're guaranteed to take some big hits from them, would that cause sustains to like shoot up? Because I wonder if the new reruns come out, that if people are just gonna skip them because, oh, I have triple amazing supports, they're all busted, I have Ruan Mei, Ting Yun, Bronya, and if with that I have that team, I don't need a sustain. So I wonder if that's gonna be the case where we are so offensive to the point where sustains just don't ever sell anymore, because we have god tier sustains like Xuan and HuoHuo where they just have absolutely piss poor banner sales, which is actually kind of crazy. And then the next character, for sure, I can see why she's all the way up there, being Jingliu. Jingliu, as insane as she is, which is crazy because she doesn't outpeak Dan Heng, but I don't think at the time where people were going crazy for Dan Heng with the E2, how insane he was and how game breaking he was, a lot of people didn't expect Jingliu to hit that same level or even higher with her SP efficiency, with her 50% crit rate bonus, with all that she does. And of course, we were teased about her in the story as well. There's a bunch of really cool things that came with Jingliu, and seeing that she actually sold less than Dan Heng might have been for the reason that E2 Dan Heng was just so freaking strong that a lot of people went for it. I know a lot of people went for it just because it was super easy to get, E2 being one of the best Eidolons in the game period at the time. So I can 100% see why that one's a little bit higher than normal. And then afterwards, Topaz and Cele rerun. Topaz is honestly very, very interesting. I want to see how her rerun does when it comes around, because she is not the core of the follow-up team. I don't think the follow-up team needs a core like how Kafka is for the dot team. Topaz is kind of there to be able to just boost the damage a little bit and do her own. While she is super duper strong for that team, I don't see the follow-up team needing Topaz outright unless you're trying to do a massive amount of sub DPS damage with Topaz and do some really cool things with her. So for the most part, I kind of see Topaz always being in the spot for being a really niche character that if you really like follow-up attack characters, go for her. If you don't, then she really isn't needed. And the same thing for HuoHuo. HuoHuo is funny enough, a lot of people were talking about her at the time, and to see that she also is the only character, if I am not wrong, where the first half banner isn't used as much or isn't pulled on extremely amount, seeing that HuoHuo is all the way down here honestly surprises me. And a lot of people didn't think they needed her, especially with Luocha coming out and Xuan coming out, which a lot of people were like, if you want to be able to have this game on easy mode, summon on those characters and you'll be fine, right? And looking at HuoHuo being the first sustain after the 2 that would be taking up those 2 slots, and her being so low, it's kind of crazy, especially because she ended up being one of the best sustainers in the game, specifically for a lot of the teams that really love energy. So basically every DPS in the game. So when her rerun comes around, I really want to know, out of all the sustains, who's going to outperform each other, you know? Who's going to do the most amount of sales when it comes to the rerun? Luocha, Xuan, and HuoHuo. If you have an answer or you think you have a right guess for this, I would love to see it in the comments. Let me know what of the 3 sustains you think are going to be able to outsell each other, which I'm very excited for. And especially Aventurine, I would love to see how his sales do after Acheron comes out, because I think Acheron might make a new peak. I don't know. It seems like it might be the case, but maybe I'm just letting hype consume me. I don't know if that's going to be true, but we'll have to see. But I'm very excited for Acheron to come out. After HuoHuo comes out, Argenti and Silverwolf rerun. This banner, honestly, I'm not surprised that it didn't do so well, just because when you look at what Argenti was surrounded with, also with Silverwolf's rerun, almost everybody, as you can see, pulled for her at that time. And if you didn't pull for her, you probably didn't need to, because we started to get in this era of MLC where you pretty much had the characters to match the weakness, so you really didn't have to worry about getting Silverwolf on your account. And then the same thing goes for Argenti. How many DPSs did we have before Argenti? We had Sele, Jing Yuan, we had Blade, Kafka, Dan Heng, Jingliu, Topaz. We had 7 DPSs before Argenti, to the point where we were like, do we really need him? Especially with Clara being a character for physical 5-star and her being an absolute monster when built correctly. You really had no reason to get Argenti. So Argenti was by far one of the most skipped banners, besides, of course, the one that actually, that's funny enough, because Argenti is the worst performing banner out of everybody on this list, even after a free unit. But of course, going after Argenti and Silverwolf, and also probably something that did attribute to them having the worst sales, is Ruan Mei, and how absolutely game breaking and insane that she is. Now, this didn't hit anywhere near the peaks of a lot of these DPS units, which I can't wait to see how a really confined DPS unit is going to do, because we haven't had one for a long time besides Argenti, because Topaz, of course, is niche for follow-up. Argenti is the all-hitting, you need to hit 5 characters in the field to make them do really good. And then you have Blade rerun, Kafka rerun, Dr.Ratio was free. Then you have Black Xuan, which was dot niche, and then you have Sparkle, which is a support with Jing Yuan and Dan Heng getting their rerun. I wonder how Acheron's going to do. Will she hit a new peak, or will she make the peak for the grossing chart for Starro? That is something very interesting that I want to see. And then after that, after Ruan Mei and Blade, because we all know how absolutely busted Ruan Mei is and how great her E1 is, how great her light cone was. A lot of people probably spent a good amount on that. Poor my boy Blade, because he was squished between some of the best units to pull on, with being Ruan Mei and Kafka. And then, of course, going into the next patch with being Dr.Ratio and Kafka. They didn't really have to sell that much because Dr.Ratio himself was free. So if you were pulling, this is basically just a Kafka chart at this point, unless you pulled for the Ratio, Eidolons, or Light Cone. And it looks like Kafka just doesn't sell as much in regards to what you would want for a dot team. You know, I think not a lot of people are very interested in the dot team in CN for some reason. I'm not 100% why, because she does have a sizable difference between everyone here. And when it comes to Kafka, when Dr.Ratio is out, because this would technically be just Kafka summons. Some people made us just save for that patch because, like, oh, I got Ratio for free. Kind of no reason for me to summon on this patch. I kind of just want to take my W and just not summon on Kafka, which honestly a bunch of people did, but some people did just go ahead and get Kafka since they didn't have to get for Ratio because he was free. And then going on to our current patches, again, you wouldn't really summon on Black Xuan if you didn't already have Kafka, which you had 2 chances to get. I know she does have some other niche uses, which being in a bunch of different debuff teams with like Dr.Ratio or something like that, or having just Black Xuan with other dot units just to have Black Xuan as the primary unit. There's a lot of other niche uses you could use her in, and then Dan Heng being here, of course, being a character that a lot of people are looking forward to. But with Dr.Ratio being behind him and being free, a lot of people did already have that main DPS for Imaginary, which can probably understandably why this is such a low peak for this banner in particular. And then lastly, Sparkle and Jing Yuan is going up and up, looking like he's always about to surpass Black Xuan. And honestly, I can see it surpassing Black Xuan, probably not getting anywhere near these peaks though that we have for a lot of these DPSs and where Ruan Mei is. I honestly believe so, because Jing Yuan isn't just a crazy rerun for a lot of people. only as light cone for the most part. And then Sparkle, although she is an amazing support unit, a lot of people have Bronya, a lot of people have Ruan Mei, a lot of people have Ting Yun, Hanya, Asta, Pele. You can name all the other characters that do debuffs and support. So other than that, that's gonna be it for this video. This was honestly very interesting and honestly very fun to look at, because just seeing how people treat their summons, how people summon for these characters, and seeing why people probably did this is actually some of the funner things to do when it comes to looking at these charts. So other than that, let me know what banner you're waiting for on a rerun when it comes to them coming out. A lot of these sustains are waiting for their turn, and we have a lot of crazy characters that haven't got their rerun yet. So other than that, that's gonna be it for this video. Let me know what you think about this graph or something like that or let me know what you're waiting for in terms of 2.1 or the reruns coming. So other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. See you on the next one, and peace.